My name is John Mendez, and I am your host. Welcome to Walk to Wealth, where I motivate and inspire people new to the world of personal finance by letting you all in behind the scenes of someone who's still on his way.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do us one teeny tiny little favor. Make sure to refer us to a friend. If you find any value in this episode or have found any value in the episodes prior, the greatest thank you that you can give us is referring us to a friend so we can impact one more life in their walk to wealth. Without further ado, I have a super special guest with me today. Rachel, for anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Rachel Murphy, and I help parents teach their teens about money.
All right, it's pretty straightforward. And Rachel, tell us a little bit about your walk to wealth. How did you get here? What made you feel pulled to speak to parents about talking to their teens? How did this all transpire? Where does the story take place?
Yeah, so I never had it in my mind I was going to teach parents about how to teach the kids about money. We actually were in the parenting space teaching life and leadership skills. And we have a podcast for that. It's called Raising Confident Teens. And I would ask people in that community, what do you wish you had learned as a teenager? And the number one answer that kept coming up was, I wish someone had taught me about money younger, because I made a lot of mistakes and it took me a long time to dig out of that. And my husband and I had a similar story. We had made a bunch of mistakes when we had first gotten married. We had a business that we owned. It was an internet service provider. Back in the old days, when people would dial up into the internet, they would have to go through a service provider, and that was what we did. And we had kept that business going longer than we should have, and we ended up $50,000 in debt when we sold it, because we had put a lot of our expenses on credit cards, just trying to keep it going. And so at the end of that, we had no jobs and $50,000 in debt. And it took us 5 years to dig out of that, because we were making like $30,000 a year. We couldn't find work. We were really struggling. And so after going through all of that, we decided that when we had our own kids, we were going to teach them differently. And so on our own, we were teaching our kids how to handle money, but we had kind of hidden our story. Like, we were kind of ashamed of all that we had gone through, and we didn't ever talk about our story. We didn't tell anyone. Our parents didn't know how much debt we had been in, and all of our friends just thought we liked to clip coupons, and and they didn't know how desperate our situation had been. And so I just really felt like it's time that we just need to start sharing our story and what we went through. And so we started telling people our story and then teaching them how we were teaching our kids. And out of that came a book. And it was amazing to see, because we had hidden it for so long. And once we started telling the story, it was like, why did we wait so long? Because the story really resonated with a lot of people. And people would come up to us and say, man, I thought you had it all together. And after I heard your story, I realized that there's hope for me and my family. And just because you think somebody has it all together, they haven't always been that way, right? And a lot of times the successful people we see have been through some real struggles, and that's helped to make them who they are, right? And help them to learn the lessons that they needed to get to the next level. So that is how I began teaching parents how to teach their teens about money.
That's an amazing story, and I definitely love that you talked about the part of resonating. A lot of people with social media, it's a highlight reel. Just like you see the NBA on ESPN and all the sports. It's social media, just a highlight reel for life. And a lot of people, they see all these people that are massively successful, don't see the work that they put in, and don't realize that a lot of people who are like overnight successes have years and years and years of grind and grit and hard work behind that before that one day that it all came together and they actually took off.
I became an overnight success in 2 decades. Right?
Exactly. It didn't take too long. Right.
But if we can help people with our stories, the older generation, people our age, if we can help you and your generation with our stories, then it won't take you as long to achieve what we achieved. And if we can shorten the learning curve, and you're either going to learn from others' mistakes or from your own mistakes. And it's a lot easier to learn from other people's mistakes.
Agreed. No, I say the same thing. A smart man learns from his mistakes, and a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And so I wanted to talk about some of the things you would avoid if you can go back, because I feel like personally, a lot of the stuff when it comes to your personal financial health, it's like your actual physical health. A lot of it is preventative. If you take the steps earlier on, you don't have to worry about the medicine, the cures or whatever afterwards, because you'll never be in that position to get sick. You might get sick here and there, but if you set yourself up earlier on and you live a healthy financial life, it definitely will stop a lot of the things that may pop up down the road if you live a more financially responsible life. So I want to kind of go back in the time machine and to kind of ask you a little bit about what are some of the top mistakes you would have either changed or done differently, or if you were giving that advice to someone else who's in that situation currently, how would you advise them? What are some of the top mistakes that you would avoid that probably would have sped up this process?
The number one thing that I feel like made us took us the longest was because our mindset wasn't right. Like, we didn't believe in ourselves after we had gone through that business failure, and then Keith got some work in the tech industry, and then we went through 3 layoffs in 9 months. So that was during the .com meltdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then after the last layoff, nobody was hiring. So we felt like we're just nothing we do is working. So we're just going to settle. So we were making $30,000 a year. Keith was driving a taxi cab, and it was like years and years stuck in that position. We were paying our debt off, amazingly enough, on that tiny income, but we were living in the worst neighborhood in town, driving $1,500 cars. And back then we didn't have the advantages of like YouTube videos, podcasts to really like seek
counsel, guidance, help, advice.
Yeah, there's so many mentors that young people can have today that you don't have to have a physical mentor right in front of you, right? Your mentor could be somebody that's written a book or somebody that has a podcast that you may never meet, but you can be like, man, they changed my life, right? So we didn't have the advantage. We had books and we would read books, but back then there was not a whole lot of personal finance. It was more investing, not a whole lot of get out of debt like there is now.
Yeah.
So I think that the number one thing you can do is get your mindset right and believe in yourself, because you can do amazing things if you just decide to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's funny how once you put your mind to it, opportunities will start showing up in places you never would have thought were possible. And it turns out those places are a lot closer than you actually think. They were in front of you all along, just you weren't able to see them yet because your header wasn't where it's supposed to be at.
Right. It's kind of like you buy a car, a certain brand of car, and then all of a sudden you realize, man, there's a lot of these everywhere. Did the number of them change? Not really. You just became more aware and you noticed them. So like you change your mindset and you start looking for something. I'm looking for somebody to help me with this. Then people will pop up, right? And the decision of deciding to change your life, like we went round and round about declaring bankruptcy, and I don't judge anybody that has done that because I understand how desperate you are when you're in that situation and how you just want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. But we went round and round. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Everybody was telling us we should, and we just didn't feel like we were supposed to. Mm-hmm. So we made the decision, even though we had no idea how we were going to pay it off. We just decided we're going to pay it off, and we figured it out, right?
I want to touch on a little bit too before we keep on going. That same exact story about seeing the Honda cars everywhere is exactly what happened to me. Back when it was kind of before the real start of my personal finance journey, and I talked about it in one of my first podcast episodes, but my first investment ever in the market that I made intentionally was in Tesla. And it was because they were doing a 5-1 stock split back in, I think, September of 2020. And the stock was going to go down to like 300 or 200 something. And I invested in Tesla. Didn't understand why. I kind of did it on a whim. My friend told me to. Someone that I trusted. Someone that knew a lot about finances and stocks than I did. And so I took its word for it. It's funny how that very same month, there just so happened to be a Tesla across the street, one of my neighbors. Never seen the Teslas in my city before. And all of a sudden, there's one literally across the street from where I live in my complex. And then from now on, everywhere I drive, I always see Teslas. Why? Because I want a Tesla to be my dream car, the Model S. And it's funny how people are I'm pretty sure it's a prefrontal cortex. How it works, it's pretty much like a target finder, essentially. It's like a heat-seeking missile. The only thing that guides it is the subconscious, kind of. And so it's tracking this thing, but you don't even know what it's tracking unless you, one, get your mindset right. Two, take some time to reflect to see what kind of program you got going on. So
yeah,
that's why I noticed.
That's why they say vision boards. A lot of people talk about vision boards, just putting your goal out in front of you, not just writing it down, but like thinking about yourself. It sounds a little woo-woo, I know, but like thinking about yourself. What will I be doing when I have this house? What will it look like? And it does a change. It is like a heat-seeking missile, right? It does. It helps you focus on. I mean, even with sports, they teach athletes to visualize making the basket. Don't think about missing. Mm-hmm. Just think about making it. And they say that the results, they perform better. They could go over there and practice, or just take the time to sit on the bench for a minute and just think about it, and they'll perform better if they just sit there and think about achieving the goal than if they're actually practicing.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, I know you said that when you were starting to make this, have your epiphany, there wasn't as much resources out there readily available on the topic of personal finance. What are some of the things that made a major impact and caused you to shift your trajectory? If you can name a couple books, or if you listen to a speaker or a class, what really shifted your mindset?
Well, this was a long time ago. So those people aren't as popular now. Dave Ramsey actually really helped us out a lot. I don't agree with a lot of his stuff past the getting out of debt stuff, but he made me mad enough and motivated enough at the beginning to really, really get out of debt. He's very good at helping people get out of debt. It was not anybody. David Bach is very good. The Automatic Millionaire. I don't know if you've read that, where he talks about automating as much of your life as you can. If you automate your 401k and automate your savings so it comes out automatically, it's too much trouble to go in there and change it. Mm-hmm. You're going to figure out a way to find the money somewhere else rather than raiding your 401k, right? Those are two, but there's a lot of books that I like to recommend now for people your age that weren't around when I was around, like Set for Life by Scott Trench. He talks about how to set yourself up now as a young person before you get trapped by lifestyle creep and buy as much house as you can afford and as much of a car as you can afford. Why not take the early years of your career to live really simply and on a lot smaller percentage of your income, and use that remainder to build massive wealth, invest in real estate, and then you can retire 40 instead of 65, and not retire to do nothing, but retire to contribute, give back, help other people, and do what you really love rather than what you have to do because you've got yourself trapped by a mortgage or a car payment.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you too. So now that you kind of had this epiphany, you started off on your journey and you made it to the other side. Your grass is greener now. You've seen the other side of the mountain. I wanted to ask you too, maybe a little bit of a personal question, but I wanted to ask you, growing up, what was your relationship with money? And for the teens that don't have the best relationship, what advice to them would you give to kind of change their framework? Because that's a two-way street. Your parents have to be able to agree with it, but the teens also have to be receptive as well. What advice would you give to your teens based off the potential bad relationship that you had with money that you had to overcome in your later years so that they can fix them now?
I didn't really have... My parents actually did a decent job of teaching me about money. The issue became my parents' generation did not have credit cards growing up, right? I vaguely remember my parents having a credit card, but they really didn't use it. So they did not know how to teach us the lessons about credit cards and like, hey, this is what happens if you don't pay that off every month. Let's look at an interest. How much do you really pay in interest? And I think a lot of my generation, it just was not a topic that they talked about. Money was like taboo. We don't talk about money. And so my generation have now become parents, and we weren't taught, so we don't know how to teach it. And we feel like we're not adequate enough to teach it. And I think a lot of people feel like they have to know everything in order to start, right? You don't have to teach your kids advanced investing. You don't have to teach them investing at all. If you could just teach them the basics, they would be ahead of 90% of every other teenager out there, right? So I would say if I were to talk to a teenager, I would say you are at the most opportune time to learn this lesson before you make all the mistakes. And if you can learn this lesson now, these lessons now, you could build extreme wealth, right? And not be living in poverty and always scraping by and struggling like so many people do. They have the statistic is most people can't come up with like $400 for an emergency. That's sad, right? Because we live in one of the most prosperous nations in the world, and people cannot come up with $400 for an emergency. And is it because they're not making enough? Sometimes that is true. But a lot of times is they just never learned how to manage it, right?
Yeah, well, then there's also the point. I think personally that may be a limiting belief, because I think everyone is in a position where they can save $1 a day.
Right.
So it's more about the timeline that you put on yourself. Because if you broaden the timeline a little bit, I feel like everyone could save up to that excuse. But because people can't save up to it as quickly as they'd like, I don't know if it's a sense of maybe embarrassment or a sense of maybe failure or whatever the sense of.
They don't think it's going to make a difference. They don't think $1 makes a difference. But if you take a 15-year-old and say, hey, let's plug in, there's all these free investing calculators. I think investor.gov has a great one. We're like, hey, plug in, starting at 15, if you just save $100 a month, how much will you have? Compared to if you start at 30 or 35, right? It's huge. It's a huge difference. And if you can start when you're at your very first job, 15, 16, and just get in the habit. Habits is what's going to make you or break you. If you can just get into the habit of living on 70 or 80% of your income instead of trying to survive on 100%, and then some emergency comes and you don't know how to handle it, or you have no retirement, right? Most people could live on less than they make now. Like if their boss were to come to them and say, hey, John, the company's doing really bad. I'm going to have to cut everybody's salary 80 to 80% of what they're making. Most people would be able to figure it out, right? They'd cut corners here and there, or they'd go find another job that paid better, right? But just it's mental. You can trick yourself, and you can play games with yourself to make it more fun. It doesn't have to be a drag to save money. It can be fun, right?
And that's another thing too. It's like people have this like intrinsic desire to, like, let's say they have $100 just to make use of it all,
right?
Because as you said, they don't see the long term. They don't see what $1 can day or $100 a day or whatever, whatever number it is can do over a compounding period of time. And I think one of the advice that I personally would give, because I'm still in this age, from what I see just based on social media and mainstream hip hop and everything, is everyone likes the term to flex. They like to show off. Everyone likes to. I feel like one of the things that we should make cool or popping, as you could say, or I say myself, is your net worth. I feel like personally that's one of the biggest flexes that you could have. It's like, oh yeah, look at my new car, but it's like, and that's depreciated. Let's flip the script. Hey, look at my net worth. It's like, oh, you're worth something. I would rather be worth something than have a car that's taking money out of my pocket every single month. And it's just changing the things that we put at the top of the pedestal. I feel like we're really changing the dynamics of making investing not only fun, but something that's actually worthwhile. Because a lot of people want the attention. They want to come off as, it's easier to appear wealthy than it is to be wealthy. And people take the shortcut to make up for their lack.
Yeah, I think there's a slow shift that's going on in society that in past generations, people wanted things. Like I want the china and the nice dining room set and now they can't get people to take it off their hands, right? That generation is slowly, they're dying or they're going into nursing homes and nobody wants their stuff, right? I think people are realizing stuff isn't, at least I hope, people are realizing stuff is not as important as they thought it was. And what's more important is relationships, experiences, being able to sleep at night and have peace of mind because you're not worried about being in debt.
I think the issue is that the stuff changed. I think
maybe,
my grandparents, they have like a giant like china set that's never even used. I don't know why you would buy plates that aren't meant for putting food on it, or cups that aren't meant for drinking out of. It's just meant there for decoration. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Special occasions, but we never, nothing's ever special enough.
Exactly.
Right.
No holidays, no birthdays, nothing's ever special enough for them to come out. But it's like things like that. But kids my age now, I mean, I feel like cars always kind of been a thing, but I feel like people place a lot more value on jewelry now. Actually, I feel like it's of a lot more important. Sneakers, especially the sneaker industry. People are spending ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't understand that. What's the deal with I can't bend my feet? I don't want to. I'm going to walk like this because I can't bend my shoe because that makes it less valuable. I just don't get that, man.
It's back to the whole thing of appearance that we talked about. Is people want to have, as I said, it's easier to appear wealthy. If I have these sneakers, then you should also have your get nice sneakers for special occasions. But it's like if you're wearing everyday sneakers and you can't bend your toes, and I used to, for full transparency, I still do that with a couple of my sneakers just because. Just so I can get more lifespan out of them. Full transparency, I still do that myself. But I wanted to ask you a question while I was still on my topic a little bit, kind of to take it back a little bit in terms of money being a taboo topic. In households now where money is a taboo topic, because I know for me in my situation, it always was as well. And although we're different generations, it's the same issue.
Right.
We can't talk about money, especially when we're coming from scarce background,
right?
Scarce beginnings, right? So how do we shift that framework? Let's say, because a lot of the people you're talking to right now from my audience are going to be on the teenager side.
Right.
They're going to be on the young adult side. As I said, it's a two-party. It's two roads. How do they get a parental figure or guardian figure that they're living with to kind of be on the same page when once you're past 30, 35, you kind of hard-baked already. It's difficult. So what would advice would you give to people my age trying to break the ice and make this topic something that's more common and something that's should be easily to talk about and not something that's taboo?
Yeah, I think it's people like you that are doing that, like making it normal to talk about money. It is going to be hard to get your parents to talk about money because you have what we call the powdered butt syndrome. Like, if I've powdered your butt, you can't give me money advice. So it's hard for parents to take advice from their kids because they feel like you're still my baby, right? Right.
Yeah.
So the only way you can really teach your parents, your aunties and uncles and grandparents about money is really by example. And not necessarily being flashy and showing off, but they can see what's going on, right? I'm sure you'll move up you get a nicer house. You'll start doing things that they were never able to do. And it's just being the type of person that is open, but not bragging about it. But like maybe to your nieces and nephews and the next generation, your kids, just saying, hey, I want to help you. I want to teach you. I don't want this to just be about me and me getting wealthy and me holding the secrets to myself. I want to teach because it's learnable skills, right? And just making it normal. I think there's a lot of people. I just came back from FinCon. You and I were talking about that earlier. There is a whole bunch of 20 and 30-year-old content creators out there that are speaking about money, and I'm really excited about that because I think your generation needs that. I mean, my generation needed it and really didn't get that much of it, but there's more of it now than there used to be. I think you just have to, it's going to be it's a fine line of not bragging, right? Yeah. And maybe like with your friends, you don't have to talk about how much you're making, but you could have little contests. Say, hey, what percentage because everybody's going to make a different income. Hey, what percentage? What's your savings percentage? Let's have a contest. We used to, when we were getting out of debt, we used to have contests with our friends, like who can survive who can go the longest without having to go to the grocery store and just eat stuff that's in their house, right? And who can go get by with like $10 this week, right? Making that instead of like, hey, let's go to a restaurant and hang out and eat. Let's say, hey, let's all come over to my house. Everybody bring something. We'll have a party, right? Making the fun more accessible for everybody, like because there's always going to be people that are struggling with money, and you don't want them to feel like they can't have fun,
participate,
right?
and be involved. Everything.
Make cheap fun. That was something that really helped me.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that, because I strongly believe I'm hyper competitive. I'm probably, if you were to test it, probably in the upper percentiles of the population of people that's just like, I want to compete. I want to get after it. But I feel like we live in a society where now, especially for a little bit younger than my generation, it's starting to see, at least I haven't seen it in person yet, but like I've seen videos where it's like they'll have soccer games for kids and they won't keep score. And I just feel like that incentivizes competition. Not incentivizes, it places a negative connotation around competition. And I genuinely feel like competition, when there's not ill intent behind it, pushes us and holds us accountable to perform optimally, perform better, achieve more, push harder than we ever could have imagined, because there's something to go against. But I feel like competition is now being painted as bad. You don't want to compete. We're all okay. We're all equal. Competition is bad. And it's like competition can do so much good for people if you just incentivized it in the right way, as I said.
And compete against yourself.
That too.
Is my savings rate better this year than it was last year? Or am I giving more this year than I was last year? Yeah, I don't like the whole everybody gets a participation well, they may not be keeping score on the field, but every one of those kids knows what the score is. Yeah.
Whether we try to overwrite the game or not, they know. They know they lost. They will go home.
They know they didn't make any goals in the other team, right? And there can be fun competition. I have kids that play sports. There can be fun competition that is teaching them lots of skills, teamwork, having fun, being physically active. And then there can be competition where the coaches are screaming and berating the kids. We can make it fun and not be bad, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing I wanted to pivot to, sorry, I keep pivoting. There's a lot of points that you touched on that I really want to talk about. One of the things you mentioned too about back in the day, that your generation before yours didn't really grow up talking about money. Money was taboo, which made the parents of your generation made it difficult for them to teach because they were inadequately taught, because the conversation was never had. I feel like a large part of that too as well. I feel like investment classes are, at least the ones that people want to invest in now, are changing so rapidly now because of technology and accessibility. One, where all the no-fee trading platforms such as Robinhood, M1 Finance, Webull, et cetera, but also because there's just so much new things. And like right now, the next hot commodity is blockchain. I had an interview that's not going live until pretty late October, but he was breaking down what blockchain actually is essentially, and the opportunity that it would have, not for like Bitcoin, Ethereum to the moon, or Dogecoin, whatever, but like actual technology that it could be used to change everything. And now a lot of people are starting to see cards and collectibles and maybe cryptocurrencies and things like that. And it's like, it's hard to, one, the generation prior wasn't adequately taught. So two, even if they weren't taught for what's now, what's hot, what people want to invest in now. So I just want to also bridge the gap in there, because some of the things that the people my age are investing in now didn't even exist maybe before 2010. This is all like really, really new stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast stuff changes.
What advice would you give to people in that situation where it's like they want to invest in the newer stuff?
I say go for it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't invest in something you don't understand. Mm-hmm. Don't invest in something because somebody did a meme on it and that's why you're investing. Like, that should not be your investing strategy. Like, Elon Musk tweeted and now everybody's buying. That's not a legitimate
investment strategy.
Yes. Right. My husband actually has a cryptocurrency podcast. It's called Generational Wealth with Crypto, and he's the expert on crypto. I know enough.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is looked down upon by a lot of people in the personal finance field.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they don't understand it. Like, and they're scared of it. Because the older you get, the more change scares you. Like, stuff like this is like, we don't understand it, so we're just going to say it's bad. I can see a lot of good coming out of that, because especially for people in third world countries that have always relied on Western Union sending money back and forth to their families to help support them, and Western Union takes out huge chunks in fees, and now they can just send money back and forth
directly for
pennies, right? And so I think it's really, and there are whole countries adopting this now, right? Like I think it's El Salvador.
Yeah.
And
one of them made it a national currency, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. They have Bitcoin Beach, where there's a whole area of the country there that the business owners accept crypto, right? So the older I get, the harder it is to keep up with stuff. But I see the value in that, and I don't want to say it's wrong because I don't understand it. But I think that innovation can happen so fast these days, and I think that we've become comfortable in the United States with the U.S. dollar being the thing, but I think we should be careful, because other countries may decide they don't want to deal with us anymore because we're inflating everything, right?
Yeah.
So I just say, here's my advice: be a learner, be a lifelong learner of everything around you, and be willing to learn and change and grow. Because not just in money, but in relationships and everything, if you can be willing to learn stuff, then there's no limit to how far you can go in life.
Definitely. No, that's a very solid point. I want to go back a little bit too, because you mentioned don't invest in anything you don't understand. And that's one of the sound principles that I learned from The Richest Man in Babylon, which has a lot of sound principles.
I love that book.
It reminded me of the saying, getting rich or getting wealthy isn't sexy. It's simple. It isn't sexy.
Right.
So
it's boring.
Because it's not the Ferrari with the top down cruising on the highway. It's like more like the Toyota Camry and
Warren Buffett driving
exactly.
it, living in the old house,
exactly.
old ranch house, driving an old car. Right.
What are some of those sound financial principles that just transcend time and will always be good advice, no matter what year, generation, currency, Bitcoin, whatever is in it?
Yeah.
What are some of those sound financial principles that you hold near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, I love Richest Man in Babylon. That's one of my top 3 books for young. I recommend to young people. Yeah, I would say spend less than you earn would be the big one, right? If you can out of the gate learn that, you can, because then you have disposable money to put towards investing, and right. If you can live on less than you earn. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, what's some of the advice you gave? Because I know you have you said kids that are my age now. What's some of the things that you taught them when they were growing up, and how has that kind of affected them in their life? Because I feel like, especially as an author, thinks that because you're an author and you did it, you're writing on this, you're the expert, that your life is super easy and your kids grew up amazingly. They're investing in, they're millionaires. So how did it actually play out while you were kind of not only learning stuff, but kind of testing the stuff out on yourself and your family, kind of?
Yeah.
How did it play out? What kind of tips did you give them? Which tips stuck with them? Which tips kind of did it?
My kids aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes, but I feel like they have a pretty good understanding of how to manage their money. If they don't have it, they don't buy it, right? Like don't go into debt for stuff that is going to depreciate, right? If it's not something, maybe a house, don't get a loan for it. That's they with our kids, we matched their first car. Like if they earned up to, we matched up to 5,000. So like we just had our
kind of like a 401k.
Yeah, it's called 401 dad is what we call it. We just had one buy a car, her first car. She's 16, And she loves that car because she is invested in it. Because she had to put the money down for half of it, right?
Yeah.
And she looked around, got a really good deal at an auction, actually, and then put a new engine in it. And it's still way cheaper than it would have been. I think it cost her like maybe $5,000 total. So
Really?
yeah. And then she got a new paint job. Like she had money left over to fix it up nice. The fun comes just like you're talking about how saving yourself. The fun comes from I made it. I got the first $500 saved or $1,000, right? It doesn't come from, they gave me the money and I had it. It took me 2 seconds, right? Like when you have to save up for something, you appreciate it more and you take better care of it and you're more excited about it. And
no, I definitely agree. I wanted to give you a bit of a curveball question that came up. What advice would you give to young adults that got into parenthood early? Because they're in kind of situation where it's like it's pretty common, especially in some less fortunate communities. It happens quite a bit, and it's like usually people in those situations, they're not well established, so it's like they didn't take the time they didn't have the time or opportunity to learn about it, and now that they have a life that they have to take care of and bring up,
for.
And now that they're responsibilities, and usually that time when you're young, you could spend more time investing on yourself, but now because their whole priorities shifted, sometimes that gets into the back burner a little bit, and money is something that they don't ever think about learning about because they're just too focused on, hey, I gotta take care. So what advice would you give to most of your typical parents, but what advice would you give to parents that became parents early?
Yeah. Well, when our oldest two were little, we were even maybe the first three, we were really, really tight with money, and we were paying off all that debt. Yeah. So like my advice would be, you don't have to spend as much on your kids when they're little bitty as you think you do. Like, you don't have to buy all the clothes. Like, just buy a pack of those little t-shirts. That's all they're really going to wear, a t-shirt and a diaper, right? You don't have to have all these cute outfits for every day of the week. You don't have to have lots of outfits. Like, you could get hand-me-downs. We got hand-me-downs from people, and I don't think we bought clothes for our kids hardly at all. Maybe one outfit. It's stay out of the stores. Like, don't go to the mall. Don't go to Target and wander, because then you'll find stuff you want to buy, right? Unless you have a specific purpose, don't and put the word out. Hey, I'm looking for this. And you'd be amazed at whose brand has, they just outgrew all their clothes. You can have the clothes, right? Don't spend a lot of money on big birthdays when they're little. They're not going to remember them. It's for you. It's not for them. And they're not going to just bake a cake and let them smash their face in it, right? Or vacations. I see people take their kids to Disney World and the kids are like 2 and 3 years old. And it's not the happiest place on earth in Florida in the summer. Like, you'll hear all of them screaming and crying. Like, if you have the money to do it, go ahead and do it. But if you're struggling, do not blow a bunch of money on vacation. You just tell yourself, hey, when I get myself straightened out, we're going to have a really awesome one. But for now, when they're little, they're not going to remember it. Don't waste your money on it. Right?
Definitely. As you've been able to grow up and raise your own children, what kind of advice are you instilling in your children so that, aside from the personal finance advice, so that when their time comes to bring up the next generation after them, what kind of advice are you instilling in them so that they could keep on paving the way forward, and so that they're not feeling like money's a taboo topic, so that they're adequately prepared to have these conversations and then teach their kids to have those conversations with their kids, and so on and so forth?
Well, I think that they learn a lot by example. So my kids have told me, I'm going to teach my kids the way you teach us, because I just love it. They like I'm pretty much hands off. Like, I give that, they get it automatic, the automatic millionaire. They get it automatically deposited to their 10% to their savings, the rest of their checking, the first of the month. Mm-hmm. They don't come ask me for money. We've agreed on what they need, If something unusual comes up that nobody had an idea of, then we talk, right? Like, hey, our sports team won the championship, so we need to go to another state for a tournament. Let's talk, right? Then I'll like, oh yeah, how much is that going to be? Then I'll add to that. But for the most part, they pretty much handle all their own money, and they get to decide. I don't say you have to put this much in clothing and this much for that. They get to decide. They move stuff around just like you do with a budget, right? You get to decide. I give them, here are my suggestions for the year. You probably should put this much in each category, but they have free reign to do that however they want. We talk a lot about real estate. Like, if you were to buy a duplex, first, as soon as you can, when you're old enough to move out on your own, the other side could pay for the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. And you could start building wealth. That's the kind of conversations we have.
I love that you mentioned at the topic of buying a duplex. The house hacking is the common term that most people hear now, the buzzword. And most people, as me being a realtor myself as well, the reason I got into real estate was the investing side of things. And we realized very quickly from being, I guess you could say, an insider in the industry, most realtors have not a clue about anything personal finance related. Only 9% of realtors, according to the president of Keller Williams, only 9% of realtors even own an investment property themselves.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? They're around it all day.
And around it all day, see it all day, touring it all day, selling it all day. Virtually none have any whatsoever. And that whole idea of making investing not only a taboo, trying to make it not a taboo topic in the household, but trying to make it not a taboo topic in the industry and bring up suggestions like, hey, that first home that you get, don't splurge. Don't go out and buy your dream home. The first step towards your dream home is your first home. Because people don't buy their dream home off the gate. They use the equity off of the sale of the first one to trade up. Hopefully you 1031 it or use some other tax reducing strategy to decrease your liability. I think if you stay in the 2 years or something like that,
get 2 out of 5. Yeah. I think a lot of people, this is the mistake of the younger generation. They expect that when they graduate college that they can have the lifestyle that their parents took 40 years to get, right?
Yeah.
If they were to go and ask their parents, where did you live when you first got married? It's probably not that nice, right? And I remember our first place. It was like, oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But you have to realize you can't have the lifestyle of somebody that's been working at it for decades right out of the gate. Be willing to live a little simple to start with. Maybe look for a property that has something that you could rent out, maybe a mother-in-law suite or something, right? That's going to be my next strategy. Any house I buy has to have either a space to build a mother-in-law suite or a mother-in-law suite. Because this house we bought, we didn't buy it. That's not the strategy we used when we bought it. But my in-laws live in the garage apartment because they need a little bit of help. And we could rent the garage apartment right now for almost our mortgage for the whole thing, right? So I never knew that strategy before a few years ago. So yeah.
And that's the thing about wealth building. I feel like it's about becoming wealthy for you and yourself, but it's like also look at the opportunity that now opened up for you to take care of people that you never originally maybe planned to take care of, or never planned to maybe just take care of at this point in time. Because as life takes twists and turns, curveballs, whatever, left and right, but it's like when you're wealthier, not only are you in a better position for yourself, but you're in a better position for those around you if need be as well. And a lot of people don't see
options.
It that way.
It's not about the money, it's about the options and the freedom to do what you want and on your own terms, right?
Yeah. Rachel, you dropped a lot of very good points. And I feel like this conversation as well is something that definitely was needed with me and my grandparents. That's what definitely helped them out. Because that's who raised me. And I know that this is definitely going to resonate with a lot of people. Where can anyone kind of get in touch with you or find out more about what you do so they can get more advice, such as some of the topics that we talked about today?
Yeah. I actually am setting up a page just for your listeners. So if you go to rachelmurphycoaching.com/walk to wealth, I'm going to have a page there that's going to have some free resources. Like if you're like, hey, I would really like to start doing that with my kids, what you do, where you start turning over parts of the budget to them. I have a little spending tracker you can print out. Don't listen to the podcast and run out and say, hey, I'm changing the way we're doing everything. I want you to be like mindful about this and just start writing down what you spend your kids on. Like, hey, on this date, I bought jeans and it cost this much, right? And just start keeping a log so how much you really are spending. And then when you decide to do that, then you have a budget amount that you could use for them. And then there'll be a link to my book if you want to buy it. It goes into more detail. A link to our podcast if you want more life and leadership skills for teens. My teens co-host on there with me, and some of the books that I recommend for teens.
That's amazing. And Rachel, it's not time for my favorite part of the show. It's time for our final 4 questions that I can fire off the top.
Okay.
What is the most impactful lesson that you learned in life?
Most impactful lesson that I learned in life. Well, that's a hard one. Okay.
Stumped you?
Yeah. Well, there's so many ways this could go. Learning that you're the center of everything, right? Learning that there's more to life than what you see. And there's other people out there that you can help and that you can make a difference in their lives. And you can fashion your life so that what you do can help others and also help your family.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Probably, let me think. Compassion. Because you have to realize that you don't see the whole story on a lot of people's lives. And that angry person at the drive-thru, you don't know what they just went through, right? Maybe they just found out somebody died that they are close to or something.
If you wanted to change someone's life with one book, what would you recommend?
Well, I'm a Christian, so it would be the Bible. There are so many good lessons in there. And I know what would Jesus do is overrated. Everybody says it, but there are so many lessons in there about how he treated people and how he loved people and how he was firm when he needed to be and how he taught a lot about money.
Yeah. A lot of it. I think I'm also a Christian as well, but the Bible definitely teaches like a lot of solid principles that help shape me and why I go about things the way I do and how I handle certain situations. So those principles are solid.
Yeah. And he taught a lot about money and how to handle it, but he also said, don't make it everything.
Exactly.
Right.
And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
I would just love to know that I have helped families like turn themselves around, because money is the leading cause of divorce, right? So if we can give our kids a good foundation, if I can give you a good foundation or my kids a good foundation, when they get married, then their marriages start out strong. And then when they have kids, their kids will not grow through broken homes because they had a strong money foundation. And we may think that it's just a little thing we're teaching, but it could generationally change people, right?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the idea I said earlier. A lot of this stuff is preventative. And so, Rachel, I genuinely appreciated the conversation I had with you today. I'm thankful for you coming onto the show and just sharing with us a lot of this stuff. Not only share with other parents, but you share with our audience. I think this is going to be stuff that's super practical, and super easy to grasp as well. I feel a lot of people talk about super complicated, overly high-tech investment strategies, and that's all fine and dandy, but sometimes you need something that you can grasp and really just take a bite out of and implement into your life now.
Yeah. If you're struggling with money, I would just say you just have to take one step. You just have to decide, I'm going to change, right? That's the hardest thing. Decide I'm going to do something different. And then, like you said, the things will start popping up like, oh, look, there's a book. Maybe I should get that book from the library, right? It's the decision that's the hardest part.
Exactly. Agreed 100%. Well, Rachel, it was a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah. Had a good time.
Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. Again, I am your host, John Mendez. You can find me at JohnMendez_realtor and at Walk to Wealth on Instagram. Please make sure to subscribe and leave a review if you're loving the podcast so far. New episodes are released every Sunday. Look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Take care.